All right, now we got YouTube joining us also.
Cool. All right.
Oh.
Having some technical difficulties.
You're going to want to go a little bit louder. They're having a little bit of hard time hearing you on the
cool.
Facebook. For the people on the Facebook, are you not hearing us at all, or is it just kind of quiet? Yep, you're just going to want to go a little bit louder.
Cool.
You're just going to want to go a little bit louder.
Cool. I just for maintain silent flight, which is really crucial for owls. He is one of the funniest birds I've ever worked, and every time I go into his enclosure, I end up smiling and laughing with him because he is so vocal. Now, that if you look outside and see that a songbird is completely circular, that is a great indicator that it's super cold outside, because the more poofy they are, the more they're trapping that heat under their feathers and they can stay nice and warm. But for Otis, that means his body is super small under all of that floof. You can see this is actually a western screech owl skull. They are incredibly small. I always joke that there's not a whole lot of room for much up there, but he definitely is pretty smart for only having this much of a skull. It's a little bit easier to kind of see on this side. Owls in general have really big sockets for their eyeballs. Now these guys mainly rely on their vision for for hunting during the day, like snowy owls. But at nighttime, those guys are going to be relying mostly on their hearing. A lot of their vision, like I said, comes from these giant old eyeballs. I have a great horned owl skull right here. These are called sclerotic rings, and they actually hold the eyeball in place, which is actually why a lot of times owls will turn their heads 270 degrees. A lot of people think they can turn it 360 degrees, but they can actually turn it only 270, which is still a great feat. The reason that they have to do this is because of those sclerotic rings. They're not able to turn their eyes within their skull like you and I can. For them, in order to look that way, they have to turn their head. So in order to adapt to this, they've had to adapt to turning 270, which is if you look this way, to the side, back, and then over this shoulder again in one big rotation, which is still pretty impressive. Now, in order to do this, they have 14 neck vertebrae. Now, us and most mammals only have 7, including giraffes, which I think is pretty cool. But birds are a lot more varied. Now, mammals, the only ones that don't have 7 are sloths and dugongs, which are kind of a different subspecies of manatees. And those guys, sloths have 8 to 9, or the dugongs have 6. But those guys are variations within mammals, whereas with birds, they can be a lot more varied. Owls have about 14. So that allows them to turn their heads almost all the way around. And Otis usually can kind of show this off, but right now he's feeling pretty relaxed, which is a great thing. Now, talking a little bit about their feathers and why Otis would need his silent flight in order to go back into the wild. Otis and all owls rely on this silent flight in order to be able to hunt more efficiently. Now, the first theory on to why they had silent flight was actually thought to be so that the prey couldn't hear them. It's actually more supported now that they think that owls really rely on it so they can't hear themselves. Because of this great hearing that they have, if their wing beats are too loud, they're not able to pinpoint their prey efficiently. Now, you can kind of see, it's kind of hard to tell on these owls. This is a western screech owl wing, by the way. Owls have these little eyelash curled hairs on the side of their feathers, whereas, I'll show you. Red-tailed hawks do not, as well as most raptor species that don't rely on silent flight. Now,
go louder. People can't hear you from there.
I feel like I'm shouting.
You're not.
Okay. So for owls, they have silent flight. You can tell because of these little eyelash hairs, it really helps break up the wind. So they can break up that wind before it hits their wing in order to kind of muffle that wing beat sound. Now, like I said, it really helps them in order to not hear themselves so they can really pinpoint their prey. Now, when Otis is flying down on something, you can really hear it because of his injury, which is something that we look for in rehabilitation patients. We want to make sure that they have that silent flight, because it doesn't matter how good your hearing is if there's a marching band behind you. So they really rely on this in order to hunt efficiently. All right. Doing okay up there?
Just everyone saying louder.
Yeah. All right. Do we have any questions rolling in yet? Or do you want me to keep talking about owls?
We have someone asking if there's any possibility of a snowy owl and a great horned owl hybridizing.
I do not believe so. Typically, they're not really found in the same kind of ranges. Snowy owls are typically going to be up north towards the Arctic Circle. The only time they're really going to be coming down south is due to something called the eruption year. Now, there's a couple different theories as to why it happens, but typically it's when a bunch of snowy owl young go down towards the southern areas in order to find more food, because there is a surplus of food up in the Arctic Circle. These guys a lot of times will rely on the lemming populations, and typically these eruption years are really closely related to the lemming population. So typically when you see a boom in the lemming population, you see a boom in the snowies, then they tend to go down more south. But typically these guys are not really going to be interacting in the wild, never mind really hybridizing or breeding at that really. Because they have very specific courting rituals and mating rituals as well. Doing okay?
Yeah, it sounds like Facebook is just having a major issue. I've tried turning off and on the audio, but I'm not sure.
I was going to say, YouTube is fine.
We can just keep going.
Okay. Alrighty. So with the Christmas season coming up, I wanted to talk a little bit about decorations. We had a lot of holidays within the last couple months. One of the things that you guys can help your local wildlife is making sure that if you have any trees in your yard, making sure that if you put lights up there, trying to make sure it doesn't get too tangled up in there, because a lot of times raptors, especially little owls over here, can get really tangled in that in the lights as well. Okay. So for these guys, making sure that your decorations are bird friendly is a really great way to help these guys out in the wild. One way to do that is putting decorations a little bit closer to your house and not really putting them out in the trees in your yard, as well as a lot of times people will get those laser light shows that are a little bit more clean for the wildlife. They're able to not be affected by them as much. Now, the lights definitely do affect these guys' patterns, so trying to use a little bit less overall light can help these guys as well. Before this Christmas season, we also had Halloween, and a lot of people don't realize that the stringy web, the fake kind of web decorations, those guys can really hurt, especially screech owls out in the wild. A lot of wildlife can get tangled up in these decorations. So we want to make sure that if we're putting out decorations to celebrate this holiday, we want to make sure that it is wildlife safe and wildlife friendly. Doing okay?
Yeah, it looks like Instagram is fully failed, so we're just gonna...
I see.
Someone was asking if you could show some of the artifacts up close, like the skulls.
Yeah. So we got a couple different things going on up here. We have a great horned owl skull. It's kind of hard to see. I don't know. We have multiple cameras here. So this is a great horned owl skull. You can see their big beak here. A lot of people ask if owls have shorter beaks than other raptors do, and not necessarily. These guys can definitely open up their mouths pretty wide. It just looks really short because of all the floof that is around their nares. Those are called phyloplumes. It really helps them sense things, especially for owls because they can't really see too close up or see too well up close. So these phyloplumes really help. It's kind of like whiskers on a cat. So it really covers up a lot of this. And so usually with a great horned owl or any owl, really, you can only see it right here past, kind of show that. So you can only really see this part. So it looks like they have a really short beak, but they don't. They have a really long beak. And you can also see these sclerotic rings right here. That's what actually holds the eyes inside their socket. A funny fact about owl eyes, they weigh about 4% of their body weight on average, which if our eyes weighed about 4% of our body weight, they would weigh about 4 pounds, which is insane. So these guys are a lot of eyeball, especially up in that skull. Now, great horns are pretty large. These guys, this is actually a barred owl skull right here. A little bit smaller, still have that long beak. And then this beak, as with all raptors, it helps them tear. A lot of people ask us if we're scared of getting bitten by them. I'm not really scared of getting bit by an owl. I'm more scared of their feet. These guys tend to have really, really strong feet, and these beaks are, like I said, mostly for tearing. So if they ever do bite me, if they get a little bit more of a hook in there, sometimes can hurt, but mostly I'm worried about their feet. They don't really have a whole lot of power behind their jaws. This is a western screech owl skull. Again, pretty small. But yeah, these guys, like I said, are mostly eyeball, a little bit more on their face, and then not a whole lot of room for the brain cavity. I also have a snowy owl foot right here. Now, snowy owls are pretty popular because of the movie Harry Potter. A funny fact about Harry Potter is that they actually used 7 different birds on screen and 12 overall to film with Hedwig. So the other funny thing is that they didn't really take care to make sure that it was the same gender. So if you look at Hedwig over time, in every single shot in every movie, she is a different gender. Now, the way you can tell that, males are really, really white, especially on the body. And with females, they have this more barring. You can kind of see this is probably a female because of all this barring. Now, with juvenile males, they do look the same as females, so it's only really able to tell once they're a little bit past their sexual maturity age, and they actually get whiter over the years for males. But yeah, so if you ever watch Harry Potter, you can watch that. Hedwig actually changes genders throughout all of them. It's pretty funny. But with snowies, they are incredibly well insulated, and you can kind of tell all of these feathers really help them. Their leg is only about this big around, you can kind of see. Whereas all of this fluff really helps them stay nice and warm, especially in those cold winters. Now, they are mostly white because they help them blend into the snow, of course. This barring actually helps them camouflage because mostly their nests are going to be on the ground. There's not a whole lot of trees within Arctic regions. Now, for these guys, the barring really helps them stay nice and camouflaged. So for the males, they don't really need it. Once they are past sexual maturity, they're going to be a lot more go-getters. They're going to be going to get food, hunting, that kind of thing. Whereas females and the juveniles are going to be hanging out around the nest, keeping them nice and camouflaged. So yeah.
And then someone was asking, in the past, I've adopted one of your birds. Is that still a program you do?
It is. So if you guys are looking for really fun Christmas gifts, or just, looking for something for the new year, you can always adopt one of our birds. All of the funds from that go right towards helping our birds. It takes a lot to feed these guys. Otis himself eats about 2 mice per day. So that costs a lot on our center. So if you adopt a bird, you get a little package explaining their story, a little bit more natural history about the bird, as well as you get like a membership with it, right, Richard? Yeah, you get a yearly membership to our center. So if you're local, you can come in anytime and hang out with our birds and all of that. But if you do adopt one, you get you get like the package, all of that really cool stuff. But like I said, all the funds go right back towards helping our birds. So it's a really great way in order to help support our center, especially if you are not local here and still want to help support us. Yeah, so you can go to our website, alaskaraptor.org. It has all the information about all of our birds that we have here, not just Otis, but all of our, we have multiple different species of owls, eagles, hawks, those kinds of things. So if you really have a favorite bird and are looking for a specific one, you can check out our website and really look at all the different options there. So yeah, do you have any other questions hanging in? Richard?
No, nothing at the moment. Ooh, did you already mention Plumicorn?
I did not yet. See if Otis has his up a little bit. He's falling asleep. So Plumicorns are a great way to help these guys camouflage. You can see Otis's, show it up there. He has one little Plumicorn sticking up. Now Otis has pretty small ones compared to like great horned owls, but Plumicorns are something that is Latin for feathered horn. It really helps them camouflage, and it's also kind of acts as eyebrows for these guys. It really tells their emotional state. So for Otis, when he's hanging out and relaxed up there, he is able to kind of show me that he is kind of half up. And if he's really scared, he will stick them straight up. And if he, so with some owls, they'll put them straight back. And it really depends on kind of what they're feeling at that moment. Now, a point toward camouflage, if they put them straight up and the wind comes through, it looks like little leaves or twigs kind of blowing through the wind. But like I said, they can also be used for communication between different predators, but also different owls as well.
Do or did people use feathers for anything like clothing, blanket, things like that?
I'm not too sure about like historically. I know a lot of indigenous populations are kind of really close to all the different raptor species. But nowadays, it is pretty illegal to have any birds or their parts because of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. It really protects all of these guys, any migratory bird that we have here in the US. A lot of people ask if they can have our feathers or pick them up, but it's actually illegal to own any birds or their parts without a specific permit for it. Because they are so fluffy, a lot of people do really like touching the owl feathers, but mostly that law is in order to protect guys, especially from hunting or poaching.
Someone said they're very much so looking forward to Owl Days, and we're asking for a reminder when it is.
Yeah, it's on the 21st. I believe it's 12 to 2, right?
No, 11 to 2.
11 to 2. And it's right here at our center. And we've got lots of cool activities going on. We got crafts table, we got hot chocolate going on, we got a couple different things like owl-related crafts going on, and you can learn all about owls. It's a really, really cool event, especially for littles, getting them hyped and interested about raptors in their area.
And for any of our out-of-town followers, we're going to be posting all about owls this coming week in preparations for Owl Days.
Yes, so look out for pictures of Otis as well as all of our different owl species that we have here.
And then someone else said, I tuned in a little bit late. Do you mind talking about the owl behind you?
Yeah. So this is Otis right up here. He is a western screech owl. He is about 3 years old at this point. He's one of our youngest birds here. He came in October of 2021 with an open metacarpal fracture on his left wing. You can kind of tell his wing over there is a little bit more droopy. He's not really able to pull it up very comfortably all the way up to his body because of this injury. His metacarpals are his wrist, so it's kind of where the wing bends over on the top. And so he had an open fracture, likely hit by a car. When we found him, he was pretty dazed, kind of out of it. We did a lot of medical care to try to get him to rehabilitate in the correct way. But for him, his injury was just too severe, and he ended up being a permanent ambassador because he's not able to fly over long distances, and he's not able to fly sightseeing. Something I talked about a little bit before. But for Otis, he wouldn't really have a good life out in the wild, so we decided to keep him here instead.
Is Otis your favorite, or is that something handlers aren't supposed to say?
It's kind of like choosing between your kids, but Otis kind of is my favorite, and that's because he's sitting next to me. If I said anything different, he might get upset, but he's definitely one of my favorites to work because of how sassy he is. He's very vocal. He has a great attitude. I just love when owls and just birds in general are very sassy. They're able to kind of show their personality that way, and usually that means they're comfortable with you. So whenever I go into Otis, he always greets me with a big vocalization, and he's very vocal throughout our sessions.
Are there any of the birds you're scared of?
Definitely can be some fear. A lot of times you have to make sure you're not showing that fear because they will take advantage of it. Mostly eagles do that. We've had instances where eagles can definitely kind of scare you or kind of hype you out. But most of the time with fear, it's more of like an internal mental game. With these guys, you really have to make sure that you're, showing off that you're not scared of them. So, yeah.
Are owls hard to take care of? Do they need vaccines or special protocols for rehab, or does it depend on the situation?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the situation. I know some rehab centers down south a lot will vaccinate for like West Nile virus. A lot of times avian influenza is a big concern up here. We try to make sure that they're not really accessing places where wild birds are also going to be accessing. They're not really hard to take care of, I would say. Definitely need special permits for them, and they do require specialized care. For Otis, most of the time we will spray him, clean him down once a day, we sanitize, and then we also make sure that he has access to food that a lot of times we give him mice, we can also give him red meat, bits of rat, and we can also get specialized food. Can be difficult sometimes, especially up here in Sitka, because we are an island community. But typically we'll get 2 mice a day, and if you're not really comfortable and a little bit more squeamish, you're not really like touching the mice, and a lot of times you have to gut them for them as well. So just being comfortable with that kind of exotic care is kind of the biggest thing for these guys.
I'm very jealous of the work you do. How would I get involved with helping birds like this?
Yeah, so there's lots of different ways to get involved. You can always volunteer with your local rehabilitation center. There is a website, I believe it's the National Wildlife, NWRA, I believe, that has a list of all the rehab centers within your area, and it's every single state has them. So you can always look that up. The way I did it, I went to college for wildlife rehabilitation. So if you're looking to get a bachelor's in this, you can do that. But you don't necessarily have to. You can definitely major in something totally different and still work with these guys. A big thing that's really helped me with these guys is psychology. So if you're really interested in behavior training, that's another thing that you can do with them. So just volunteering and then also working at the center, even if it's not necessarily this job, we have lots of different jobs that you can get involved with. We have wildlife interpreters that come up during the summer who give tours, kind of help people kind of guide to the center. They can talk about the birds all day. So if you're really more of a people person, you can do that. My job is more behind the scenes. About 90% of it is cleaning, so you have to be really comfortable with that. And making sure that you're just willing to do the hard work for these guys, because a lot of it, this is like 5% of my job is hanging out with these guys. So you want to make sure that you're comfortable with cleaning and dirty work and all that stuff.
Do birds get things like the common cold like people do?
They can get diseases like West Nile virus. We've also seen like avian influenza, but typically it has to be something that can infect their bodies. We've seen in zoo animals, we've seen them like felines get infected by like COVID and that kind of thing, but the actual virus itself has to mutate enough in order to infect that specific species. So for these guys, like I said, as long as it has mutated in order to affect these guys, it definitely can. But for like common cold, whenever I have one, I'm not really necessarily putting these guys at risk. Lots of good questions going on.
We're starting to slow down. I haven't seen any new ones. If anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them into the comments.
I have one more thing I'm going to talk about, and then if you guys have any other questions, feel free to drop them. I'm just going to talk a little bit about owls and how you can kind of identify them in your own backyard. So if you guys ever find a feather, a lot of people ask us to identify them. A great way you can tell it's an owl feather is that it's going to be super soft when you touch it. And a lot of times you can see these little, something called, what are they called? Little barbules up here. They're super soft and kind of downy. And then on the edges, you'll see these little eyelash curls going off. Whereas with the red-tailed hawk, you're going to see a very straight edge. You're going to see a very stiff-like feather because of the way that they're designed to fly. So if you ever find a feather in your backyard and it's a very silky, kind of velvety soft, that is a great indicator that is an owl feather and not necessarily another raptor. Another way you can kind of tell is just through the coloration of it. A lot of times there's great guides online that'll tell you what each species has and what color.